CNBC TV 18, Adobe present Experience Makers.
Hello and welcome to Adobe Experience Makers, brought to you by CNBC TV 18. I'm your host, Paramita Chatterjee. Now, over the course of the last few weeks, we've been exploring how technology, particularly those like artificial intelligence, using big data, can really help your business when it comes to customization and creating those key analytics that can help your bottom line. Because the buying journey has become all the more complex today with multiple buyer, supplier, partner roles all engaging through hundreds of interactions and touch points across digital channels. So it's time for B2B businesses to really scale using a new blueprint that focuses on the right prospects and creates a fast track to sales and optimizes for revenue impact. So, how can you create all of that using the right technology platforms? Our topic of discussion today is leveraging AI for the next gen experience. And to discuss all of that and more, we have with us two leading industry experts joining us on the show, starting with Samyukta Ganesh Iyer, Vice President and Head of Marketing at Kaya Limited, and Nitin Paranjape, Director Sales, Adobe. Samyukta, Nitin, thank you so much for joining us today on the show. Nitin, let me start with you and let's delve a little deeper first into this whole customer experience journey where really personalization is at the key of, or really the heart of what all brands want to achieve today when it comes to communicating with their customers. How can artificial intelligence and the latest technology platforms be leveraged to really deliver on that goal?
Hey, thank you, Paramita, for asking this question. And Samyukta, great to be sharing this podcast with you. I think this is a very important aspect, given that today's customers want an experience that is personalized and authentic. Brands have understood that in addition to making a great product, it is also important to take it where and when their customers want it. Today's consumers are very digital savvy and want a uniform experience across channels, specially tailored for them. Whether they walk into a store or buy on their mobiles, they want an experience that is consistent. That's where Adobe steps in with this suite of solutions and AI offerings like Firefly and Sensei, which enable brands in giving exceptional experiences to customers. I think using these solutions, brands can look for increased revenue, higher loyalty from their customers, and greater customer retention.
Okay, and that's really what the holy grail is, isn't it? In order to really develop that kind of loyalty, retention amongst brands. And Samyukta, you've worked across brands and across industries as well. But I think the question that many companies keep asking themselves is, does it really create customer loyalty? I mean, how do I measure when I'm investing those thousands of dollars into these new technologies?
Yeah. So thanks so much. I think it's a fantastic question, and $1 million question, like you said. I think there is a lot of hope that has been generated amongst marketeers after AI has come into being. I mean, it's since time immemorial, we've all been scared of AI in some form or the other. You've had like various TV shows. You had like science fiction movies, everyone talking about the fact that someday man versus machine, robots are going to take over the world, and so on and so forth. But I think in our case, it's a fantastic thing that has happened. It's a beautiful, I think it's like anything else, right? It's about how you kind of leverage this, use this in order to make it successful. Like I think Nitin spoke about the fact that he spoke about two very interesting things. He spoke about revenue and he spoke about retention. I think that is, like Paramita, you were saying, that is the holy grail of what every business is kind of looking for. And I think for me, it's not different. I think, in every industry, one key task is, of course, to acquire customers. But after somebody gets into your ecosystem, what happens to that person from that point onwards? I think that measurability, that trackability, everyone talks so much about big data. Everyone talks so much about getting data from various points. We're almost gluttonous in the way we gather data, right? Everyone tries to hoard as much data as possible. But my point is, are you making sense of it? I think that's where AI plays a huge role. If it can help us understand every single customer journey as uniquely as possible, and then we can hyper personalize communication to every single customer. I think that's where I can see AI really revolutionizing everything that is happening currently in the world as we see it.
So let's apply that. And Nitin, let me come across to you here, because when it comes to application, I mean, I was speaking to some, leaders in the retail space, and especially when it comes to, for instance, the sales, which is really the revenue generating vertical, or even marketing. A lot of the business leaders are sort of scratching their heads, saying, "Listen, we all know about the AI team. We know, that they're sitting there. They can, we really must leverage, but how do we go about leveraging it?" So perhaps you can share with us, sort of the framework or the key stepping stones to really using this kind of next gen technology.
Absolutely, Paramita. I think it's a great question again. I feel that customer satisfaction and revenues go hand in hand. Like Samyukta said, the proliferation of digital channels and the way our consumers are interacting with brands is creating huge amounts of data. Huge amounts of data is getting generated. We call data is the new oil, right? Smarter brands are using tools to collate and understand this data to get insights into their customers. AI plays a very important role in turning this data into value. Adobe is providing AI tools to marketers that are accessible, ready to use and operationalize. These AI tools help marketers to target customers with personalized offers and experiences, resulting in higher conversions. And I think Samyukta also touched upon this. How can they personalize experiences for their consumers so that they keep on coming back to the brand? And that also helps in cross-selling and upselling and resulting in higher sales revenues.
Indeed. You said data is the new oil, and we don't want companies to be slipping as well on this new oil, because, Samyukta, give us some real life examples, because one of the challenges, again, in my industry interactions is that a lot of this data is actually sitting sort of spread out. It's, some of it is legacy data, and you want to bring it all together and create that kind of holistic insights. I mean, share with us some examples of what has worked and perhaps what doesn't work.
Yeah. Um, I love the fact that you said we shouldn't be slipping on that oil. I think that's really happening to most people right now, because you're just like you very rightly said, and I'll give you the example of either foods or even the beauty industry. People get people will enter your ecosystem, your brand at some point in time. What happens to that person after that? Like you said, somebody may walk into your physical store today with the advent of D2C and e-commerce and omni-channel marketing. There could be various sources or various touch points because of which that person kind of walked in for the very first time. Second, do you know which communication worked in order to? It could either be very clickbait or it could be very experiential. What is it that actually charmed that person enough to kind of make that decision to even either click on your communication or even view your communication for the first time? What action did that person take after that? What was that very first transaction that was made? What was the experience that happened thereby? If I were to pick the experience or the example of the beauty industry itself, beauty is so evolving, right? As human beings, your need state in your 20s versus 30s versus 40s is going to keep changing. Do I know what you bought in the 20s? If I'm going to target, do I forget about you, after you've come in and you've picked up a service or you've picked up a product? What happens to you after that? Do I continue conversing with you long after you have left my brand? Or do I understand you enough so well that I'm able to handhold you at every stage of that customer life journey? Because somebody in their 20s could have come for a very simplistic, service, because your skin is anyway fantastic at that age. You're barely exposed to so many other hormonal issues, and so many things happen in life as you go through different life stages. Have I taken enough effort to understand what's happening in your life right now? Am I communicating to you in a manner of your liking, and am I offering you things that are relevant, or am I just looking at old database, like you spoke of legacy database? Am I just communicating because I know that you picked up XYZ service 10 years ago, and am I still talking to you in that sense? I think that entire space is what most brands and most I think organizations are offering today, in terms of understanding those customer dashboards, getting insights, not from a BI operating system, which is typically like n-1 or n-7, etc., but actually getting it real time, actually getting it on the fly to say, hey, I know you're looking for this at the moment, and I know what your past transaction history was, and therefore I know exactly what to offer to you exactly at this point in time. How intelligently, how emotionally am I able to communicate with you? I think that is what is going to make all the difference. To quote Yuval Noah, he actually speaks about storytelling and content, with AI kind of coming into our lives. And I would love to see that transpire. I don't think we are quite there as yet, but with the evolution of so many different tools and technologies we are seeing on a daily basis, I'm pretty sure that's where all of this is headed.
Indeed, talking about storytelling and content, I mean, everyone's talking about Chat GPT. If you talk about, the commonplace sort of impact that AI is having, because we've seen the kind of the level of communication that it has evolved to. Because Nitin, connect the dots again further for us. Give us those real life examples, because when Samyukta is talking about some of those micro goals, whether it is, real time communication, real time data coming in, and really giving that customer at that moment in time a customized experience, how do you actually leverage on AI to create that kind of intelligent interface?
Yeah, so Samyukta referred to data getting stale, right? And that's one of the biggest problems of using that data. Today's world dynamics, in the today's dynamic scenario, brands are looking at experimenting new strategies, driving engagement, testing the results, and continuing or changing depending on how the outcomes are. And all this is expected to happen dynamically. This is where AI automation and AI measurement, basically automating the campaigns, measuring the campaigns, and ability to make changes on the fly becomes very important. With Adobe brands, with Adobe solutions, brands can do AI-driven marketing measurements to identify actionable insights at a strategic and also at a tactical level, and execute in real time. If they want to change a campaign, if they want to send a messaging. For example, imagine a customer getting a relevant offer or recommendation to buy a product, which is an AI, which an AI engine showcases to him on the fly while he's on the site, trying to buy something, depending on his behavioral engagement with the brand and his past history, like Samhita was referring to. That is what brands are looking at. And imagine all this happening in real time with the power of AI. This is definitely going to create a huge impact on the consumer. He will feel more closer to the brand.
Okay, because there was a lot of promise, and some would say, Samyukta, that delivery of this promise was perhaps easier when the world was a lot more online. Now we're getting back into a sort of a digital space where, as we said, there are different points of interaction. Can you perhaps share with us, one part of the question was what has worked, and you shared that with us previously. But what, according to you, doesn't work, especially in the current world scenario when it comes to using some of these next gen technologies?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I think we've very rightly put, we've all been through it. Been through a scenario where it was largely offline. We went through a scenario when everything moved online. What we would have learned in 3 years, everyone learned in 3 months. Everyone knew how to, open up their D2C websites and, get on e-commerce, list themselves. And now suddenly there's this entire, very aggressive, very revenge shopping kind of a thing where everyone's like walking into stores and making their purchases. Too much has changed, right? And this is a world, like you said, the digital world actually is making things a lot more complex, simply because I think the need to harness data and to capture data correctly becomes very, very critical. Because the guy on the counter is not as savvy as somebody sitting at the back end and kind of looking at data from a very different standpoint, versus someone who's used to kind of servicing the client is not somebody who's really trained to then capture data, capture insights, and then populate all of that into one single ecosystem. And I think that's why, Paramita, you spoke about saying that a lot of promises were made. How do those promises, I would love to understand from Nitin in terms of saying that how do we ensure that the, this entire digital space of, because that person on the shop floor is fairly rudimentary, whereas the person sitting in the head office is extremely tech savvy. The two worlds just don't collide. And the reality is the customer is baffled because the communication happening through your traditional SMS, emailers, even your typical traditional outdoor radio remains very different versus say an Instagram, a Facebook, a Google, YouTube. And even within that you have performance campaigns running, you have CRM, social targeting campaigns running, then you have your social media which is saying, okay, I'm going to generate brand awareness. It's almost, for lack of a better articulation, it's almost schizophrenic, right? It's the same brand but looks different, speaks different on different touch points, because there is this almost FOMO like state saying that I need to be present everywhere, I need to talk to my client or my consumer everywhere. But in that mad frenzy of trying to over communicate, oversell to the same customer, the customer is extremely confused because your brand sounds different at different touch points. So I think I would narrow it down to two key issues, from my understanding. And that's a conundrum that I'm stuck at, saying that how do you kind of create synergies and consistency across the board in terms of ensuring that you are the same, because the brand is a person at the end of the day. You remain consistent and similar at every single touch point, whether offline or online. Second, how do you ensure that the data capturing becomes so simple, not complex, that it's easy to capture and it's easy to then put together in a single one view. Everyone's been promising about that single AI personalized one view of the customer. If we could see that, I think we're home.
I think that question goes straight across to you, Nitin. I mean, there's a lot of talk about no code, low code, bringing employee experience up to mark, where anybody can really use that kind of data. How does, for instance, some of the solutions offered by companies such as yours, how will it help to overcome some of those conundrums that Samyukta pointed out?
Yeah, I think some of the very relevant points made by Samyukta in terms of data lying in different silos. How can we bring all that data together? Like you said, in the last 2 3 years, there was a frenzy of online. People went in for online systems, tried to sell online, collected data. They were doing offline business earlier, so there is data lying there. So the first step, I think, for businesses to start with is trying to get a platform where they can consolidate all this data and make sure that they have a unique customer profile for their customers, so that they can understand the behavior of their customers, have a historical idea of what the customer has been doing with the brand. And like you said, it's definitely not easy to collate data, but today's technology allows one to do it. And the second very important thing, and since we are discussing about AI, is how do we process this huge amount of data in an automated fashion? And that's where AI steps in, where these algorithms can process data at high speed and give insights which can be leveraged to micro target and personalize experiences for customers. So I think it can be done today with the right solutions and platforms.
So, Mukta, I think you need to find those right solutions and platforms, and that's of course a key challenge that not just companies and brands such as yours are facing, but it's across the board. I think I'm hearing it from everyone. But that's the here and now, and that's going to be a time. It might be a bit of a painstaking process, but we're also keeping an eye on the future. And everybody's talking about 2030, the dangers of AI, really overtaking us a little bit, getting to know the customer a little too well, so to speak. Uh, from the future's perspective, what kind of planning are you doing as a head of marketing and somebody who's headed and seen a lot of brands through this evolution process? What role do you think, Samyukta, AI is going to play in the future for functions such as sales and marketing?
Yeah, absolutely. I think very rightly said, there is a lot of anything new, the mind resists, right? There is always that fear. And I think that entire thing of 2030 and, the evil AI and a lot of that news is kind of doing the rounds. But I think as, in the sales and marketing function, especially for marketing, I think it's a beautiful thing that has happened, simply because we've all been using programmatic and machine learning for some time now in terms of using it to generate leads and to kind of get into the entire customer funnel of leads, appointments, footfalls, etc. But I think what this kind of brings to the forte is now our ability to really optimize that funnel. And like Nitin was talking about, doing things on the fly, so there is no there's no lag or lacuna. There's no longer, I think it's kind of the a tat and all of that will become a misnomer. It will become a thing of the past, I think. And that's like beautiful, because already marketing has become the business generating engine in most organizations, because today with the advent of all of these tools and technologies kind of getting in, everything is very measurable, everything is very trackable. And that's where we are all headed. I think we are constantly looking for solutions in terms of saying, how do I make every single communication work, right? And that becomes very, very important to this mix. What we are also doing with this is also in, in my case, we are definitely in the process of kind of putting together this single view, that I was mentioning earlier. How do we kind of create a mechanism where we can marry all of these data points, and then how do we kind of simplistically use this? I think simplicity becomes very, very critical to all of this, because we can make it very complex, we can make it highly simple, and we all know that the simpler things are, the easier it is for us to intuitively work with things. I think Apple is a great example of how simplicity and intuitiveness works. And I think that's where AI will play a huge role. It's about how every marketer and salesperson out there is going to harness this power to their own human intelligence, and not say that I'm scared of what's going to happen in the future. I think the faster everyone adapts to it, and then realizes how to kind of put it in good use in each of our industries, each of our spaces. I mean, that just recently I read that somebody had written an entire book using AI. And he had actually gone on to mention, saying that how he used Chat GPT, how did he use Mid Journey, how did he design the book cover using, different tools and technology. And then there's a lot of arguments saying that, hey, but that's not even your own IP anymore. And he argued back saying, sure, AI did 90% of the job, but had I not given that 10% of the input or the prompt correctly from my end, it would have never happened. And I think that's where I see the future of where AI is headed for the sales and marketing function.
So, taking it there from Samyukta, let me come to you, Nitin, in terms of what the future holds for us. We all know the struggles in the present, and these are likely to continue. But the hope for the future is that we are going to see a better world, a more connected world. Is that what the promise of technology holds? That we will be able to build that intelligent experience engine that all companies are seeking today?
Absolutely, Parvati. And Samyukta has highlighted about how she wants to leverage AI in the future. And I think the question that brands have to answer is not where do they start. I think they should answer when do they start. Adopting any new technology for the benefit is always great, and adopting it responsibly is fantastic. So I would strongly urge brands to take the steps now. The first step, like I said earlier, is to look at consolidating data across the different silos and creating unique customer profiles. This data can then be leveraged with the right AI tools to provide actionable insights. Further, use automation to drive engagement and AI-based marketing measurements to fine-tune and enable personalization. In a nutshell, enable great experiences for your customers so that they keep coming back to you for more.
Thank you so much, Nitin. So clearly, the ground rules, or rather the rules of the business, remain the same, which is greater engagement, which leads to greater business. And technology has to be a given there. There's no looking back as far as companies and brands are concerned. And the future indeed is all about using artificial intelligence more effectively, but in a simpler manner, to create that kind of next gen experience. Thank you so much, Samyukta and Nitin, for joining us on this podcast today of Adobe Experience Makers, where we've learned what the future is likely to look like. And indeed, technology and artificial intelligence is still going to be the key driver in order for brands to leverage on that technology, consolidate and collate all that big data which is being created along that customer experience journey, and to deliver effectively on their business goals. Thank you for joining us on this podcast today, brought to you by CNBC TV 18.
CNBC TV 18, Adobe present Experience Makers.